Okay. Second part. It is 5:49 p.m. Saturday, March 14th. I am about to head out and get some sushi. Very excited for that. But you know what? This has to be done before I head out. So let's get this done first. So the particle model of matter helps us understand how materials move across the cell membrane, okay? Remember how I said over here? The cell membranes move across each other. They're not always staying in the same position, okay? Because all matter is made of particles, and particles are always moving. So when you have solids like ice, it's tightly packed, it's just vibrating, right? And most of the gases, they're flying in around and freely. And when you add heat, energy speeds them up and moves them around a lot faster, okay? Particles are attracted to each other. Particles have forces pulling them towards one another, like tiny magnets. This is what really holds them together. You'll learn about this in chemistry unit, plus and minus charges that you have. And there are spaces between particles. Even though it seems like, you know what, this is the one that I'm gonna draw. It seems like there's like a model here and it's like a solid. It seems like there are no spaces in between, but there are always spaces in between. It's just they are tightly packed, but they're not perfectly sealed no matter what. Okay? There are always gaps in between. Like it's very, 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 very small. So other particles can fit through. Even if it looks solid, they can still pass through. Okay, now I'm going to talk about concentration gradient, okay? So this is a bit of a bizarre concept, but you will understand it, so bear with me. Okay, so a concentration gradient is the difference in the amount of substance between two areas, okay? So I'm going to write that down. Concentration gradient is the difference in the amount of a substance between two areas. Okay. So as you can see, let's just zoom in over here. I'm gonna call this left and right, okay? So we can see that on the left side, I'm gonna circle this. You have a lot of these concentration. Let's just call them dots, okay? We have a lot of them. So because there's a lot of them on the left side, it wants to move to the right side, right? Because you want to spread out, okay? Now, if this wall in the here, over here, if this was not a regular wall, and if we call this a membrane barrier, which what they're saying is literally this thing. Okay, if this thing over here was over here, right? So I'm just gonna erase it here. If we were to say there's like the wiggly tail, the head and wiggly tail, right? And then obviously the other side over here. Essentially, they can let certain substance to move along their concentration gradient. It naturally flows them sometimes, okay? And when they get to here, where it's like an equal amount of stuff on the left side and the right side, it means we have reached equilibrium, okay? So I'm gonna say this is my equilibrium. Okay, this is what a concentration gradient really is. Okay, now, for a cell to survive, they need stuff to go in and out. Like, just like how Mr. Kim is gonna go eat sushi in about 2 hours. No, 3 hours? Anyways. I need to eat something and, poop it out, right? Because you need some things to go into a cell and things to get out of the cell, okay? So I'm gonna say for a cell to live, it constantly needs to move materials, or you can say substances, in and out, okay? Like gases, nutrients, waste, and such. And we're only going to talk about a few of them in Science 10. So the cell membrane controls all transport, okay? We already talked about this. Cell membrane are responsible for transport. That things can go in and out, okay? So things like ions, which we'll talk about in chemistry, these are tiny charged particles. So examples like sodium and potassium, okay? So when we write them, we say there's a positive charge. And these are ions. Certain things like molecules, okay? Like oxygen, carbon dioxide, glucose. If you don't remember what it is, glucose are literally just sugar. Or even things like water. They don't have a charge on them, okay? Our potassium and sodium in the cell, they have a charge, they have a plus charge. Whereas oxygen, carbon dioxide, glucose, water don't have a charge. I think it would be super cool if they had a charge. And if we're breathing charged oxygen, which I don't think that can exist, I think it would be cool. But this is what we're talking about, okay? Okay. So there are many examples of transportation, of how things can go through in a cell, right? Remember that we're back here. These little wiggly tails and the head, okay? When things are going through, one of the example we have is a passive transport, okay? The word passive means no energy really is required. When someone is passive aggressive, what does that really mean? Well, they're being, watch your mouth, Mr. Kim. They're being mean and rude without putting any effort in. They just let things naturally spread out, right? Like they're spreading that, they're telling someone, oh, you look terrible today, without really putting a lot of effort into it. So just like that, passive transports don't require any energy. It's a very natural process. Things just flow through, right? Okay, so I'm gonna write down passive transport is the movement of particles, okay, from an area of high concentration to low concentration. Okay. Moving down the concentration gradient, okay? I'll come back here, but remember how we talked about this? The concentration gradient on the left side, we have a lot of particles. On the right side, we don't, so it naturally flows through. That's what I'm talking about over here. The things on the left side here flows to the right side naturally because there's a lot on the left side, and you want the cell to be in an equilibrium, right? You want to be balanced. So that's what it is, okay? And I'm going to write down, most importantly, no energy required for things to go through. Things will flow through naturally, like automatically, essentially. You don't need to add like an energy here to pump things out. So diffusion is a passive transport, the type of one. Passive transport, and it's a word that we use in daily life too. Things have diffuse, spreading out. So yeah, it's a natural movement of particles along their concentration gradient from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. So it's the same thing. I guess I will just write it one more time. Movement of particles from high to low concentration. Okay. So two examples that things pass through are actually carbon dioxide and oxygen. Okay. So when cells are breathing, they can take in, so for us humans, we can breathe in oxygen and then release carbon dioxide. When things are going in, they're going from high concentration to low concentration through a diffusion, which is known as passive transport, very naturally. You don't have to put effort into it, right? Because if you think about it, when we breathe, we don't put a lot of energy, or well, I mean, yes, energy is required, but we don't put a lot of energy. That's an analogy. So carbon dioxide is a waste product of a cell. Okay. It leaves the cell by diffusion. So I'm gonna say leaves the cell through diffusion. Okay. Oxygen gas diffuses across the cell membrane into the cell. So if we were to say this is inside of a cell, outside, and if we were to say these are oxygen, they can just freely flow in. Okay. Okay. So to summarize it, diffusion is a passive transport. Things like carbon dioxide and oxygen can flow through passive transport of diffusion. Okay. Osmosis is also another example of passive transport. Okay. It is the movement of water. Okay. It's the movement of water molecule from an area of more water to less water. So again, same thing. It goes from high to low concentration. Okay. Okay. So if there is a concentration gradient across a cell membrane and the solute molecules are not able to pass through, there will be a net movement of water molecules through the cell membrane. So if you look at this thing over here, you can see that on the left side, we have more water. So these like red things are supposed to be your oxygen, and these like small little things around it. So these are like this thing that I'm drawing over here. This is your H2O water, okay? So we have a lot of water over here, high water, and then we have low water over here, okay? These little things, like the cube blocks, are supposed to be your sodium or potassium. They just drew it in a different way. So we have a lot of those high solute and low solute, right? Think about it as like when you have a lot of salty food like potato chips, you are gonna get craving for water because your mouth is very filled up with a lot of sodium, right? So you want to drink more water. That's what really this is talking about. You have more salt on the right side and not enough water. So your body's telling you that you need more water to keep it at balance. And that's what osmosis is. It's a passive transport movement of water where it goes from high to low. And if there's not a lot of water on the right side, which I'm going to say this is your inside the cell, these water molecule wants to go in here. Okay? I hope I'm making sense. If I don't make sense, you guys are going to have to email me and tell me, Mr. Kim, I have no idea what you were talking about. Your video was terrible. And I'll remake the video and send it to you, okay? Okay, so these are examples of osmosis, okay? So we can kind of predict the direction in which a net movement of water will occur, okay? So we're going to do a simple thing. So the first one we have is called hypertonic solution. So I'm going to say hypertonic, okay? Okay, so we're saying that this is a solution that has a higher concentration of solute than that in a cell. Okay, this is what hypertonic is. Okay, in this case, water in your cell will leave. Okay, so you can see over here that what color am I gonna use? The direction of this water that I'm coloring over here is a lot bigger, so the water's escaping your cell a lot quicker than the water actually entering your cell. Okay, so it just means that the cell is essentially shrinking. As you can see that there's a bit of a shrinking over here. This is an example of a hypertonic. And for the next one, we have hypotonic. So unlike the one before where we had a lot of solutes over here, these little dots are supposed to be solutes, right? These things. So this is an example of a solution that has lower concentration of solutes than that in a cell. Okay. Water will enter the cell in this case. So in a hypotonic situation, water's gonna get into the cell and you are gonna see the cell swelling and getting bigger, okay? Whereas a hypertonic situation, your water is leaving the cell. And then lastly, we have isotonic solution. Okay, this is your ideal situation. You want a perfect balance. So it just means that a solution has the same concentration gradient. we're at equilibrium, like a perfect balance between the two. So the amount of water leaving the cell versus the water entering the cell is at the same rate because there's an equal amount of solute outside the cell and inside the cell. So it's nice and balanced. You want your cell to be in an isotonic situation. So if you were to go back over here, let's say hypertonic, right? It means there's so much salt around the area that they're trying to balance it by letting the water out of the cell. Whereas hypotonic, too much water is trying to get into the cell, it's swollen. And isotonic is a nice balance.